Welcome to Deep Transformation, Self-Society Spirit. I'm Roger Walsh, and our co-host is John Dupuy. And today our guest is, in some ways, the easiest to introduce, and in some ways the hardest. Both easiest and hardest because he has had a remarkably rich and contributing career, and so there are many things that can easily be mentioned. On the other hand, if we covered them all, we'd be taking up most of the time of the podcast. I'm speaking about Governor Jerry Brown, who, among other things, is been the longest-serving governor in California history, and in modern times, both the youngest and the oldest. But in addition to his political career, which is stellar, in fact, one of the most outstanding in American history, he's he's unusual in multiple ways, having been deeply influenced by his Jesuit background and training, and also having been way ahead of his time in introducing ecological concerns, alternative energy, having had a deep spiritual side to him, having studied Zen in Japan, working with Mother Teresa directly in her home for the dying in Calcutta, and having been deeply immersed in cultural and educational issues as well. And perhaps he now lives on a ranch in Northern California, and I think certainly one of the most unusual things is that he at his ranch, he supports ecological research and recently had a beetle named after him, Bembidium brownorum. So that's one of a kind. So, Jerry, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. It's really a gift to be with you and to have you with us today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you and to speak and converse and think about transformation. It's a topic under different names I've thought about for many, many decades. In fact, in the Jesuit life, which I pursued from 1956 to 1960 in a seminary that was very different than today, almost medieval in the silence, the speaking of Latin, the following a very close regime. Anyway, one of the goals, if not the key goal, was what they call the life of perfection. And perfection sounds like transformation, or maybe the word conversion. And so my thought, just the title of your show, transformation, it's a term that I've heard for many years. But personally, I find, am I transformed? What would transformation look like? That is a more haunting question that I don't have a ready answer to. So I'd say that the transformative process and the life of perfection are not free of ambiguity or question. That doesn't mean they're not worth pursuing, but what it is you're pursuing, I think, should be a matter of continuing reflection.
Yeah, so you're pointing to the value of ongoing inquiry into both oneself and into life and into what one can be. And it feels like those have been some of the values that have inspired your work in so many areas. Of course, you're best known for your political work. How would you describe the values that have most powered your life and your career and your contributions?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't use the term values.
Mm-hmm.
It's a term that I'm not quite sure. Values, it tends to be an economic term, a value, valuation, valorum, property tax, ad valorem property tax. So, but I do, in responding to that term or that idea, I would substitute the word orientation, or how one's shaped in life. And of course, we're all shaped by our upbringing, by our bodily DNA and other hormonal influences that we barely understand, but which shape our lives. So for me, the key factor is I was born in 1938 in San Francisco. San Francisco, very different than the one today. We had a Republican mayor. Uh, we had Roosevelt was president. In fact, we had a Democrat as governor that nobody even knows about, Colbert Olson. But growing up in San Francisco, it was a very different place. Totally calmer, really a leave it to beaver kind of uh, situation. Middle class. Um, the eruptions of the '60s were 30 years in the future. So I think that growing up and unquestioning, we said the Pledge of Allegiance in school, put our hand over our heart. No one challenged, well, wait a minute, what are we doing this? There was no challenge there. I was a Boy Scout. In fact, I just went to the 100th anniversary of the Camp Royale, where I stayed near the Russian River and gave a little talk there. So, but I think that upbringing in a we call it conservative today. I just thought that was reality as I experienced it. And my father was a lawyer. My mother, of course, was just a homemaker. Um, well, I wouldn't say just because it's quite a job. And I had two older sisters. And my father ran for district attorney of San Francisco in 1943. So he was campaigning when I was 5 years old. I was in kindergarten in San Francisco, a place called West Portal. And he was elected DA, and he was sworn in on January 8th, 1944. I have a picture of that event at the San Francisco City Hall. The mayor, my father, all the dignitaries, mostly men that were involved in that. That's the world. So I've reflected on the fact of how different that world is. And so there's an orderliness. There's a lack of ambiguity. This is the way the world is. That's the way it is everywhere. And we didn't, think about the Holocaust or, in fact, with a nuclear bomb. I can remember a kid across the street, Brian Daly, telling me this atomic bomb is really something, uh, but I didn't quite know what it was. I know it was a big bomb. So that's a level of innocence very much at variance with what you think of as San Francisco today. Also, when you think of when I think of being influenced, my grandmother would read me Bible stories. Moses and the bulrushes, Sodom and Gomorrah, Cain and Abel. And at the same time, she told me about her upbringing at the Mountain House. And the Mountain House was a stagecoach stop where she was born, right near there, and grew up. And that's where I live today. That land is still in our family. And I built a house there and restored the barns. But the point was, she said the Mountain House was a very special place. And that left an impression on me. So that when I had the chance, number one, I got my father's interest in the land given to me. And then I decided I would build a house there and I would move there after the governor's office, my term, which ended in 2019, January. So those are influences. And I'd say regularity, there's a right and there's a wrong. America is a great country. Our leaders are great people. Roosevelt was great. So that's how I grew up. Very different than the post colonial, postmodern skepticism about truth, about values, the whole question about what's really going on. The epistemology that we see in the world very different after Foucault or after the influence of Nietzsche and others. It's a totally different world. And I grew up in a very stable world order. It was, in my block, we probably had maybe there's 15 houses, 20 houses. And maybe I once counted once there were 60 kids. And of all the people, I knew all the families there. There was one woman who'd been married before. and so she was a divorcee, and that was a big deal. Everybody else is mommy and daddy, uh, and it was all, we had one Jewish family, no Mexican American, no African American. Um, so it was a fairly homogeneous, clear uh, world that I came up in. So that is an anchor point that I view the more chaotic, unpredictable, deconstructive um, sense that we now inevitably share in the world of 20 and 25.
Yeah, definitely the world that I grew up in, Jerry. And then the 60s happened, but things were squared away. My father was a veteran from World War II, decorated, a good man, Catholic. I grew up also. And there seemed to be a lot of stability and right and wrong and decency. And my parents would never think of cheating on their taxes. And, it was such a stability there. And I really value that. And then the world changed. And I lived in San Francisco also, and I'd love to hear what you think about San Francisco today as opposed to when you were there, and the transformation and change that we've been going through so incredibly quickly, and how to ride that wave, and how to be present with that.
Well, uh, I I am somewhat I have certain anarchist perspective, certain uh, predilection, certainly to question authority. But I will say, as I look at the chaos, as I walk uh, from my apartment where I am now down toward Market Street of the City Hall, you see people yelling on the street, people sitting, smoking, or dealing dope, or acting very strangely. So it's a chaotic world. And that chaos, I think, spread throughout the whole country is one of the contributing factors to the presidency of Donald Trump. He enjoys a widespread support, certainly among Republicans, but throughout the whole society. It's not 50%, but it's above 40%. And I think he's phenomenon. And the way he's tearing down institutions and so transactional, doing whatever he feels like, that is perceived as fighting this chaos, whatever this different modern world for a lot of people is something they don't like, and they're perceiving Trump as an avenger, somebody who's going to bring back the America that they knew. So I think, while being static or stultified or not changing is bad, but a heightened tempo of change that is perceived as chaotic or as contrary to what people learn when they're growing up, that is very unsettling. And that unsettlement, I think, feeds Trump to the point where I don't know, 10, 20, 30% believe that Trump is actually sent by God to correct all this chaos, this work of the devil, as it were. So we're in a clashing civilization here with contending forces, and so that's the way I see it. The very hard to govern, very hard to earn respect, um, and there we are. So it's an exciting period. There's a lot of openness. There's creativity. There's the Silicon Valley, the world of art, learning. It's all very vibrant. But like the Weimar Republic, this level of freedom also can be associated with such fear and trembling and chaos that then people look for the strong leader, the strong man, fascism, to calm the waters and to reduce their anxiety and insecurity. So that's where we are. It's a tale of two cities, very exciting, but very dangerous.
Yeah, and you're pointing to one of the great characteristics of our time, Jerry, and that is the extraordinary rate of transformation and the destabilization of everything from supposedly bedrock institutions to cultural ways of understanding, of making sense of the world. It's been called a crisis of sense-making, an epistemological crisis. I mean, so many names pointing to the fact that there is a dramatic reduction in stability and the ability to make sense of what's happening. There's just too much happening for most people to be able to comprehend. It results in a sense of confusion and a grasping after uh, the idea or even the myth of a golden era in the past, make America great again, or of someone who will get us back to this old way of being. And clearly, I think one of the implications of what you're saying is there's no way back. How do we manage this chaotic process of both positive and negative dimensions and changes?
Roger and I and our team would like to thank you for your support and interest in the Deep Transformation Podcast and the ongoing conversation in which we pursue the love of truth, the love of beauty, and the love of goodness, the eternal virtues and verities. If you've been touched and moved by this adventure and journey, we would ask you to press the like button and hit subscribe. It is deeply appreciated and enables us to grow and increase our ability to contribute. Thank you.
How do we manage this chaotic process of both positive and negative dimensions and changes?
Yeah, well, it feels like uh, life has speeded up, certainly through the media, through the internet, through the profusion or explosion of knowledge, of memes, of imagery, of stories. All that is bombarding all of us. And that does create, well, the challenge is, for example, in a democracy, uh, you need a consensus. If you're going to have we the people, the we has to have some coherence. And we don't have we the people. We have many different uh, subsets. You've got the religious right. You have the progressive left. You have the many people in between. So getting a stable consensus on which the rule of law can really work and be supported, we don't have that right now. And how we get that remains to be seen. And it's not just America. In Europe, you have far-right parties. And I don't want to use the word right because it's a matter of authoritarian. You want a strong person, people. Some people want it, not everybody. But there's a vacuum. There was a time in the 30s, Mussolini, we had dictators showing up in different parts of the world, different countries. And that tendency to look for the one man show, the one person who's going to bring order. Could be a woman too. You have a woman in Italy whose father was a fascist. So the democratic idea, which certainly when I grew up, was unquestioned. Today, it's really up for grabs. Can we run a country with diversity, with checks and balances, with differing opinions being worked out, mediated in the society? And right now, we're not seeing that. It's zero sum. It's win. And even in the foreign policy, one of the most common, I call it a cliche, is we have to win. We have to win against China. We have to beat China. Well, if you say you want USC to beat Notre Dame in football, you know what that means. Well, when you say the U.S., 330 million people, are going to beat China, 1.4 billion people, what does that even mean? I would suggest, and I believe it's not clear at all. And so there we are. We're trying to impose a framework that might fit on the football field, but it doesn't fit in international relations because we were on this planet. We got 8 billion people. We have all these problems with climate getting worse, with biodiversity suffering, with weaponry and bio threats and all sorts of things occurring, lots of power, and it has to be managed with some rules. But in order to have rules, you got to have a consensus. In order to have a consensus, you have to have shared belief, which we don't have. So that's the big challenge. Can we find some commonality, some things as human beings we know and we can share? And right now, the demagoguery, the payoff for scapegoating is very high. And I would say, and this is a sad report, but just from my understanding of politics, if you're say in your mind, well, the problem is unaffordable housing, the problem is homeless and mentally ill people, the problem is rising prices. Okay, the problem is too many fires or floods. Okay, if you want to give an answer to that, it's going to cost enormous sums of money, and you're going to have to change people's positions in ways that they're not going to like. So, actually, solving these problems is politically at this point is virtually impossible. But if you can construct a narrative and a framework that a certain subgroup is responsible, and if we just take care of them, if we control them, if we expel the immigrants, if we control the lefties, if we control the DEI people, then our lives will be much better. That scapegoating, which is the heart of what Trump is doing, it works. At least it works, for a while until it finally does produce what people are hoping for. So we're in a world where, in fact, do anything is very difficult. If you want to really get at climate change, it costs money. You got to pay for the transition. You want people to get rid of their gas stove. They're not going to do it unless you give them some money. If you give them some money, you're going to have money. So that's going to take some taxes or cutting something else. So we're in a land of what I once called an era of limits. If you want to do one thing, you got to do less of something else. And we need more resources on the problem. That's for the government, that's called taxes. And that is not something that is acceptable because people don't believe in the government leaders. Politicians, if you ask what you think of the leaders of California or the Congress, people are not going to give you a positive. Well, if they don't have a positive feeling, why would they entrust their hard-earned money to you? So we're in a real dilemma that we can't convince the people to pay for what they need. So the attractiveness of scapegoating to maintain your electoral position, winning, is very, very attractive. So I would identify that as a big dilemma right now. And when I read people saying, well, what are the issues? The issues are unaffordable housing. I think to myself, okay, unaffordable housing. What are you going to do? You're going to lower the price of houses? Well, that would lower the value of people's number one asset. You can't do that. Now, a recession, big recession or a depression would do that. So if you can't lower the price of housing, maybe you can stabilize it. That's the hope. But then they say, well, let's have affordable housing. Well, affordable housing is unaffordable housing, like all housing is today, but with a government subsidy to give you money, in effect, to buy down the rent or the price. But then where do you get that money? That comes out of the tax dollar. And so we're in a squeeze of things we want to do, but they require a public belief and commitment in order to pay for what is needed. And that public belief is not there. And because of the tendency to scapegoating and blame, it just gets harder. So we're in a dilemma. And one of the things I hope is that Trump is such a reductio ad absurdum. He's taking positions and pushing them so far, like on his tariffs, that make no sense. He's putting a big tariff on India. He wants India to be a bulwark ally of America in the contest with China, and yet he's slapping them in the face. So he's doing that in 50 different ways. That may hopefully come to haunt him, and then we can get a change. Of course, who's the change to? And as you asked about values, what's the program? How are you going to do this? I would say that we're in a real pickle. We're in a real dilemma that we've seen in previous periods of history. And how we work out of it, I don't think, it's worth talking about, but I think it's very challenging. And then on top of all that, we have a doomsday clock, which is ticking ever closer to doomsday, telling us that the danger is not being reduced, but the danger is growing. So there we are. It's a very exciting time.
Yeah, well, that's a great summary, Jerry, or a great overview, and I really appreciate the fact that you're pointing to the fact that the issues are so complex and so interconnected, and that at depth they are fundamentally questions of values, or and meaning, and trust, and a variety of psychological issues in many ways that aren't usually spoken of, and in the face of the enormous complexity and multifactorial nature of the threats we're facing, the simplistic answer is to look for a very concrete us versus them scapegoating approach, which is what we're seeing now. And yet, as you point out, it's certainly not going to solve the problems, and in some ways, going to make them worse. Um, so anyway, thank you for bringing in that the the pointing to the complexity, and what I sometimes speak of what I think of. I think there are a number of fallacies that are even easy to fall into them. I call the single focus fallacies. One is that there's the single issue fallacy, thinking there's just one issue. Second is the single response fallacy, which is there's just one particular kind of response that's appropriate. And clearly, we need much richer understandings. Um, there's a lot of ways we could go here. Is something you would like to respond to there before we get into one of the points you raised about the doomsday clock and the nuclear issue?
I'm not sure what are you seeking? What point did you want to?
Well, I just kind of riffed in response to your, in an acknowledgement, appreciation of your bringing to the foreground the complexity of multiple factors and uh, involved in our current political, social, global situation. It's what, technically it's called a wicked problem, a problem which is so interconnected and so complex. You try to solve one thing, in some ways it can often make other things worse. Uh, so we really are facing a wicked problem with our social political.
But it's nothing new. People throughout human history have faced problems. They're different. The tribes have been warring with other tribes, monsoons and catastrophes and tsunamis and earthquakes and war. That's the history of humanity. So we're the only thing different now is, well, we got 8 billion people. That's a big difference. Number two, we have a lot of technology that we never had before. So we have a power. We have powers. When I say we, certain people, certain, Palantir or Google or the Defense Department or Putin, there's power that resides in certain places and in certain individuals. And that power can make things happen. They can destroy things. So, but I don't think that's anything unusual. We personally, we have our own dilemmas, our own life. We can get hit by a car, get cancer, get a heart attack. So life is on the edge. We don't always know we're on the edge, but we are at any moment. So society is on the edge, and we can't become paralyzed because life is what it is. And we've had, I think, a rather protected world in America, separated by the oceans. Certainly, growing up, I was very calm and very secure. And I think to myself, when I read about World War II and what was going on in Poland, Eastern Europe, and Russia in 1943, when I first went to kindergarten, I think of my birthday party when I was 4 years old, which I can remember, and 5 years old. This is 1944 and 43. what the horrors that were going on. So that's the way it is. Now, some of those horrors are coming home, and that's what the doomsday clock is all about. Nuclear, bio, climate, and also disruptive technologies like AI and the satellites, the pattern of satellites, and what that all can be used for and weaponry. So, with all this power, there's two big things we need, which we don't have anywhere near enough of, and one of them is a sense of wanting to work together. Uh, a shared sense of common danger, common fate, which we don't have. And if you think of Xi Jinping and Biden or Trump or Putin, they talk, like one could win, and maybe one might under certain circumstances. But there's a great danger that we all lose if we don't control climate, if we don't find ways to minimize pandemics, if we don't find a way to reduce some of the inequalities that will uh, foster terrorism. And terrorism plus artificial intelligence linked to genetic engineering could result in man made pandemics of a horrible character. And that's why the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists puts out this doomsday clock. And I participate in the hearings. They decide, they go over a couple of days each year. And so we have these big issues. And what they all come down to is we have this incredible power that can destroy all of us. So we have a common vulnerability, but we don't have a common politics. It's what we don't have, and what we need is what I would call planetary realism. The realism of traditional realism is hard boiled, realpolitik. I've got the power. You got to do what I want. Okay, that's traditional realism. Romanticism is, oh, we're all going to make the world wonderful and pretty. The truth of the matter is, we're on the brink. We're on the brink. Bill Perry, former Secretary of Defense, who's still alive at the age of 90, almost 97, he wrote a book called My Journey at the Nuclear Brink in the present tense. So we're at this brink, and the big guys, the big power people, should collaborate to protect themselves. But the old historic egotism, nationalism, this power of believing in the state that gets people to go to war, that's so powerful. And what is needed is this bigger picture of common endeavor, of shared vulnerability, so it gives rise to shared interests. But that is still very obscure. Now, can Trump figure that out? Trump seems to be, I mean, he's talking to Putin. That's more, Biden was not inclined to do that. But there's seemingly no principle. And this idea of transactionalism, or Trump, let's make a deal. The mantra of Biden and few people before him was we need rules, we need norms that we all agree on. We need the World Trade Organization, WTO. We need nuclear arms agreements. We need trade agreements that we all agree to. There was rules that we all govern by. Now the dominant political thought rhetoric is, no, it's my country, and you got to be strong, and you push the other guys aside. That's kind of a 19th century view of colliding powers. And what is needed, given the planetary threats that I've just mentioned, is a common endeavor to deal with climate, to deal with pandemic, to reduce nuclear danger, dramatically reduce it. So those are big problems. But in America, deportation and immigrants is a more exciting problem. Homelessness in the streets is a big problem, but it's not as big as these global threats that our leaders ought to be viewing. So I just say, to summarize it all, there's nothing different in the sense that we're on the edge of dying or destruction. That's where we are. By the way, there was a great Barry McGuire tune, 1960, on the eve of destruction. Okay, we've been on the eve of destruction for a long time. Uh, but the challenge is, can we push our politics in a way that will allow the obvious, the common threats to be responded to in a common way, even though China has a different view of human rights than the United States. Uh, Putin has his view of Ukraine. We've got a lot of profound differences, but we can all agree we don't want to have nuclear bombs flying around. We don't want some terrorist group to engineer some kind of new agent that could spread around the world and kill 500 million people. We all agree we don't want to see the climate. We don't all agree on the climate. So there we are, where these are the big issues. But when you come right down to it, walk outside your door, you got problems right here. And people can't afford to buy a house. The college graduates can't find a job. 40% of the people live hand to mouth, paycheck to paycheck. So there's a variety of problems. And I'd say, if you're thinking about transformation, that's a good thing. And I think you got to work on that. And to the extent we can figure out how we do that in common for the society, for our community, that's very important too. And it's a continuing challenge. It's not something you pick up a formula and just apply it. It's something we have to, as we're doing on this show, you have to talk about it, think about it. And the answers out of that process will emerge.
Yeah, Jerry, I feel like I've been sitting at the feet of an Old Testament prophet. You've just been laying it out. Hear, O Israel, this is it. And I would ask you, what do you think small steps that we can take to nobilize the human spirit so we can begin to see our commonality, maybe just starting with our country, and stop tearing each other apart and come back together again and start moving in that direction where all of these issues come from ourselves in our own spiritual crises or lack of spirituality or commonality? How do we begin to see our way through this darkness into the direction of hope?
All right. Well, here I have a certain disjointing sense here, because I've done Zen meditation. I've been a Jesuit. I've followed personal paths of transformation or serious quest for a higher kind of life. But on the other hand, I've been a politician, and politicians are aiming at winning the next election. And we got this guy Trump, and people who think like I do like to get him out of there. Get him out of there takes a battle. You got to win some elections. Right now, the Republicans are trying to change the congressional lines in Texas to get another 5 delegates, 5 congressmen. They're going to try that. So the Republicans are trying very hard to make sure that there'll be a Trump majority next year, the November election. So people don't like that, are trying to stop it. And you stop it with candidates, with advertising, with organizing, with raising money. And you raise money from people who have money. So you're talking about vested interests. You're talking about rich people. You're talking about industry, banking, insurance, maybe oil. You're talking about labor unions, teachers unions, and you've got to get all that money. So that's the world we live in. Now, as an individual, you can pursue your particular path. And we should, because we're all alive and we're going to have a certain amount of time, and that's it. So we want to maximize that. In terms of the general politics, I mean, this is my business. And I can tell you, it's not what I'd call a nice business. It's not what you want to discuss on this program. But that's what it is. It's like war. War is not nice. If you look what's going on in Ukraine, if you look at what we did in World War II, World War I, there it is. So you have this problem of evil, and then you have the problem of good. And I remember the movie on Mother Teresa. You saw these starving or vacant, emaciated people looking out for a barbed wire fence. Obviously, some people from World War II. And then Mother Teresa talked, but there's a light in the world. And she was a light. And she always said, just find the first person and help that person, lift that poor person out of the streets. So I think you have to take the immediate, and where you can be helpful and human and responsive, you do that. And where political opportunities come, you got to be part of it. But knowing what I know, run for governor 4 times, run for president 3 times. I can tell you, as an individual, you're sitting there in a big stadium watching what's going on in the field, but you are in the stands for the most part. Now, there may become opportunities where you can add your voice, your pocketbook, your vote. So do it. But we are very dependent on powers and forces. A, we don't control, and B, we don't understand. So that makes life very exciting. Gets you up in the morning because it's not clear what's going on. I don't know whether that inspires you or depresses you, but that's just the way it is.
Yeah. Well, it's not just an intellectual journey, which it has been. It's also very emotionally impactful, what you've been saying. And it's like, okay, well said.
Well, it's good to have an upbringing. I feel very rooted in the land where my grandmother grew up. It was a stagecoach. She was born in 1878. She died in 1974. And so I knew her for 36 years of my life, and quite a transition. But when you've been on the same dirt, I walk that land and can look up at the night at the moon and stars and look at the blue oak trees. I feel the world is in order. There's a stability, even though I'm just describing it's chaos. So there's many ways of looking at things, and but it's hard. I mean, you can't to look at like the doomsday clock. Most people don't want to pay attention to it, and even the people who put out the doomsday clock. Do we really feel it's 89 seconds? The doomsday? What the hell does that mean? It used to be as far back as 17 minutes. I mean, thought when the Iron Curtain came down and everything seemed to be getting better. Well, now everything seems to be getting worse. So that's the truth. But you can't get paralyzed by the truth. You have to think deeper about what is going on, what are the implications, and what I can do. And that's all I can say is the quest, the inquiry, the ever openness to what is, and to try to find, and not to try, but to act out of the best sense that you can muster in yourself, and to help others and to inspire and be a force for inspiring others. Very important. We need mutual help and inspiration because we're on a brink. And even to use the word, Bill Perry did that book. I think it's very emblematic. The New York Times didn't review it, and I called up the New York Times and said, "Hey, you have to review this book. It's very important. This guy's Bill Perry knows what he's talking about." They said, "Well, it's already out. We don't publish reviews after the book is already on the book stands." I said, "Well, wait a minute. This is really important." Well, not too bad. So as it turned out, I called the New York Review of Books, and I said, "You guys ought to review it." Well, they wouldn't. So they said, "You review it." And I did. I wrote a review of Bill Perry's book. So I'm really very much influenced by his thinking. And his thinking is we are living on the brink. So that's worth thinking about. And thinking about it, realizing most people aren't worried. This is not something people want to talk about. In fact, if you tell them how dangerous it is, they're going to get turned off. Tell them, you're a wet blanket. I don't want to, come on, you're really negative. If people want the nice, warm, fuzzy, and so how do you understand the truth? How do you speak the truth in a way it can be heard and is not demoralizing? That I would say is the question. Have truth, but to have commitment and inspiration and dedication to doing everything you can.
Yeah, and with your Zen background, Jerry, I'm inclined to bring up. You're pointing to to the extraordinary complexity of these issues and their urgency and the fact that there aren't simple answers. And it reminds me of a kind of Zen koan, given your background, and particularly what's called a Genji koan, a koan which arises out of life itself. And the nature of the koan is there's no one final answer, but you have to just keep wrestling with it and going into it again and again. And every time you do, there's the potential for it taking you deeper into the question, deeper into yourself, and deeper into life. And these issues you're raising are really the koans of our time. And there aren't easy answers. And as you say, it's absolutely crucial that we keep looking at them.
Well, the Zazen, as I understand it, is just breathe, just focus, and just sitting. Okay, that you're not. You don't have. There's not an answer. The state of emptiness. I can't say that I attain the state of emptiness, but I have a sense that that's not about something you can use. Something I'm going to leverage my sense of emptiness to something. It just is, and trying to get that notion of being without a gaining idea. I've been thinking. I don't know whether it really clarifies anything, but I read a book recently, and in the book there was a reference to a man whose name I think was Langdon. I'm not sure. Anyway, he's a writer. I think ultimately he committed suicide, but he was a writer on the Holocaust, and he criticized the book on meaning written by the logotherapy.
Viktor Frankl. Yeah,
he did not like Viktor Frankl trying to derive meaning from the experience in the camps. He said there's no meaning; it just was, and he wasn't diminishing it, but he was approaching it in a different way, in a way that sounded very honest. Can we accept something? There's just no explanation. Don't derive any meaning. I remember Werner Erhard once saying that life is empty and meaningless, but don't derive anything from that. You can't derive any conclusion. So just sit, just be in the face of all that. Now, how you do that, or even what that might mean, I don't know if there's any further you can go in that path, but that is the message, I think, of Zen. If you can say Zen has a message, I guess you can't. We have a statement that we made when I was in the Jesuits. It was a Latin phrase that we would encourage one another. It was called age quod agis. It's do what you're doing. Just do what you're doing. And they would tell me that because we, as part of our work, part of our path, we had to pick grapes. There was a winery connected to the seminary, to the novitiate. And so we'd be out during the summer picking grapes, and I'd be talking philosophy or theology. They say, Brother Brown, just pick grapes. Age quod agis. Now, I created a charter school in Oakland. I made their motto, age quod agis. So do what you're doing. And that means fully embrace, be present. And so there's quite a lot of meaning in that particular Jesuit slogan. I don't even know if they use it anymore. It's one that I continue to refer to. What the hell are we talking about? What is age quod agis? How do you do what you're doing? I mean, that's a tautology. But as Gregory Bateson said, all the big ideas are tautologies.
Well, and there's also the Zen. Since we're in a Zen, there's also the Zen story. Facing a wall of stone and just keep going. so yeah,
That's kind of where we are, or where we're always with. Yeah. But we got to do something in the meantime. That's what the way I name my life now is I'm 87, so I'm going to die. I don't know when, but not that far off. What do I do in the meantime? I asked some of my contemporaries, what's to be done in the meantime? And they said, what are you talking about? I said, between now and death, or senility, what's your program? So I think you have to sit on that question because it's something you got to ask yourself every day.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and we're all older, the three of us sitting here. So, whatever happens, we won't have to go through it for too long. But yeah, what do we, why do you get up in the morning and put your shoes on? And why are you here? What is your personal response given what you know? And it says in Ecclesiastes that great knowledge is great grief. So how, in the face of that, how do we take that next step and how do we motivate ourselves just to be present and attempt to confront the darkness and be a light, a candle in the darkness? That's a huge,
I
huge
think the key
question.
way is to find people who are more enlightened and spend time with them, pick up uh, what others have already realized. I have reflected, as you asked me about what values and what overarching vision. That was one of the things you wrote down. And I think to myself, I don't know that I can't formulate an overall vision, but every morning I get up, I'm excited. I'm really enthusiastic. Boy, another day, beautiful out there. The birds are chirping, the sun has come up. Uh, However, I'm not in charge of that feeling. It just shows up. And someday I may wake up totally depressed. So I feel that I'm not in charge exactly. I guess I can make it worse, by drinking or getting in a rut of some kind. And by living an active, full life and doing things that you believe are valuable, that's important. But the inherent will to live, the inherent appreciation, that seems to be prior to my awareness. It just is something that I'm in. I'm in some larger gestalt that I show up in. And I'm so far so good. We don't know what I'm going to feel like tomorrow or the next, nor will you. And some people get very depressed. Um, some people have bigger problems than others, and some people can respond to great crisis. So that's just what being human is dealing with that whole range of human experience.
And and to go to your question of, okay, between now and then, between now and death, we have today. So what is there something you'd like to do? You've done so much. Is there something you'd really like to do now?
Yes, yes. I'm trying to put together a book. I have hundreds of pages from various periods of my life, and there's a lot of I've encountered, both in the religious life and in the political world, and from an era that is past. What I grew up in doesn't exist anymore. It exists in some sense, but radically changed. So, how to write that? What has been my education? And I read the very grand biography of Henry Adams, and he talked about his education. Everything in life was his education. And so I'm thinking about my education, how I could probe that, uh, put it in good, clear prose, and share something uh, that I would find of interest. And that's what I'm doing now. But will I accomplish that? I don't know. I've been trying to write a book for 40 years. So I've got a little barrier here. So that's my goal. I'd like to, in the meantime, that's what I intend to do. Besides maintaining my ranch and making olive oil and talking to old friends and new friends.
Yeah.
I think that would be a very good book, and I certainly would read it.
It would be a good book if I could write. Well, and I've written many things, and I've written book reviews, and uh, I'm writing. I do shorter work, but putting together a larger narrative. Uh, Obviously, they do 40,000 books a year, and Roger, you've written a dozen books, so it can't be an impossible task.
Sometimes it feels like it. But no, well, yep, definitely.
I look behind you, I see nothing but books. So obviously, the book is not some rare beast.
Well, I think it was Ecclesiastes of the making of books. There is no end except if you're an author. It feels like there's definitely an end to it. So, but but if you So a lot of threads here, Jerry. I want to just touch back into the global issues because we've talked about the nuclear issue, which is a big one, and you've been deeply concerned with it. And you're also president of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, which was actually, I think, founded by Albert Einstein on the original Manhattan Project scientists. And as I understand it, it was originally centered around the nuclear issue, but has since broadened to include other of the global threats, for example, environmental issues. And I think of I'll just give my 2 cents worth here. I think of multiple issues here. And kind of, we have not only the nuclear and but we have uh, pollution as a huge issue, part of the environmental issue. So many forms of pollution, from toxins, lead, and plastic, a big one now. We have ecological degradation, climate change. You've mentioned that's a big one. Gets a lot of attention. You mentioned genetic engineering. You mentioned artificial intelligence, and you mentioned the complexity of systems. And then, of course, there are issues we don't know about because we haven't recognized them yet. It took us 400 years to recognize that, running internal combustion machines created a lot of carbon dioxide. So are there other? I'd love to hear any other reflections you'd like to bring up on the other global issues we're facing.
Well, I'll bring up the matter of the nuclear danger, since that is still it's as important as it is underreported. So, excuse me. So this is still a big deal. We had 1 million people in Central Park in New York in 1982 on the freeze movement. Freeze the number of nuclear weapons. Well, the Pentagon and the Congress said, no way. We have a gap with Russia. We got to keep up. So we kept going, and now we have we have a lot of nuclear weapons. As it turned out, we had 70. The world had 70 to 80,000 nuclear weapons, Russia and the United States, and now we're down to a mere 12,000. But it doesn't take very many to kill millions of people. And the key here is fear. The fear of China, the fear of Russia, the fear of North Korea, the fear of the Iranians is so strong that whatever the people want, these weapon systems, they seem to get them. So, and you have, in addition to the fear, that if we don't have a lot of nuclear weapons, then we'll be bombed. If we don't build, as we're doing now, we're rebuilding our intercontinental ballistic missiles, cost hundreds of billions. We're building new submarines for delivering nuclear weapons. We're getting a new bomber. The whole nuclear framework, the infrastructure, it's all being redone. It cost about $2 trillion. It'll take about 30 years. So we're embarking upon that, and we want to win. We want to beat the others, mostly China. Of course, China is building up theirs at the same time, and we don't control them. They don't control us. In the middle of all that, so you have this fear and you have difference. We're democratic. Under Trump, it's not clear what we are, but China's different, and China wants to dominate, but we don't think we dominate. We just think the free world is there, and we're trying to help them. So we have these great differences. But not only the ideas, but you have this money machine. The Pentagon, there's a recent book called The $1 Trillion War Machine. $1 Trillion War Machine. That's what it is. The Pentagon budget is about $920 billion, and next year it's going to $1 trillion. First time, $1 trillion. And America is selling 40% of the arms in the world. That's the armaments. So you have and people are making money. If you look at Gaza and you look at that suffering, all those people dying, they're getting hit with metal of some kind of weaponry. A lot of that is paid for, if not built, in America. And people are getting a profit. Raytheon, Boeing, General Dynamics, they're making money, big money, and they're going to make more. As long as the arms race continues, there's a big payoff. So you got greed and you got fear, all working toward a goal of more armaments. But the trouble is, as you intensify your armament, you engender not stability and confidence, but you engender fear. So the other side, they do the same damn thing. And as they do that, then we respond. So you have this addictive process of escalating armaments that instead of uh, making us more stable, more secure, does the opposite. On the other hand, we've been around since Hiroshima, Nagasaki. No nuclear bomb has been used in anger since then. We've had a lot of tests, but no bombing. So people say that's because we have our weapons, and to maintain this 80 years of no nuclear use, we got to keep building those weapons. And you can't prove it. It's hard. Logic, you can question it, but there we are. And so not only do you have a logic, the nuclear logic, thinking the unthinkable, theorists like Herman Kahn and Kissinger in his early days and other people have a whole theory of deterrence, very sophisticated, hard to follow through all these weapon systems. Are we ahead? Are they ahead? Is there a window of vulnerability? What? Okay, that's one level. And then underneath it, you have people make real money. I'll give you an example. There's something called the ICBM caucus. That's a caucus of representatives in Congress, the House and the Senate, representatives from North Dakota, from Wyoming, from Montana, where they have ICBM emplacements. And they are dedicated to maintaining the ICBM force and make sure that it grows and never is taken away, because that's money. It's like the communities are like prisons built in their community. It's jobs, it's money, it's economic activity. So that is a very powerful force. And the ICBMs, Bill Perry says we don't need them. And they're dangerous because they're fixed in a location. The Russians and the Chinese know where they are, and they can take them out if they launch their missile. And all we can do to not have them taken out is launch on the warning. But the warning may be false because we've had mistaken warnings in the past. So the launch on warning, which is inherent in the International Intercontinental Ballistic Missile, ICBM, it's inherent in it. It's bad. So we ought to just get rid of it. And people high up, I've talked to people who've been high up in the Pentagon, and they admit that. But they say politically, we can't do anything about it. And this organization of congressmen and the money they get from these companies and the investments these companies make in their local community, the Chamber of Commerce, the Rotary Club, investment, the Boys Club, all that is a interconnected infrastructure of maintaining and enhancing just the ICBMs. And you can talk about the submarines and all the rest of them. So we're caught. We're not just talking ideas or rhetoric. We're talking jobs, dollars and cents, profits by powerful people who have propagandists, lobbyists, and lawyers. And that is, and by the way, you don't hear much about it. You don't pick up the New York Times. You hear about the description of the flow of money, how much Boeing is making on the F-35, even though it's the ICBM, not called the Sentinel, it's already 80 billion over budget or something, 80%. So these are dilemmas, and this is the truth. But that truth is not very empowering. So after you hear all that, what the hell do you do? So then a very logical response is to shut up. And that's basically what we're doing. We're not talking about it. And so that's the dilemma. To talk about it is to turn people off. But not to talk about it is to be complicit in a very dangerous tendency that is characterizing our country and the countries elsewhere. So there we are. And you may conclude, well, I think I'm just going to take care of my own transformation. We'll have to let the world deal with it as best they can. But things will happen. There are organizations you can be a part of. I think the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists is doing its part. We have the Arms Control Agency. We have the Nuclear Threat Initiative. We have a number of people working. But I can tell you at this point, the pro-military, pro-escalation is more powerful. And how that will change and how Trump plays into that, how the elections complicated. But these are worth thinking about. I do submit, though, that there are a relatively limited number of people that can make a difference. Now, having said all that, we know from Greta, a 12-year-old, was able to make a big impact. So if somebody can sense this, can really take it into themselves and feel it, and get enough internal power, they can excite a movement, an effort. So we're kind of waiting for a Greta or a Martin Luther King. We've had some of those people like Dan Ellsberg, but their impact is relatively limited. So that's kind of the brutal truth from the front. So
Yeah, and thanks very much for,
and I can tell you that's the way it is.
yeah.
I'm not discouraged. I tell you, get up every day. It's fantastic to be alive. And we can work on our own little lives. And those little lives is all we got. So that's good. But at the same time, I think you got to keep your eyes open. And we should not sleep in the delusion that things are better than they are. They're good in many respects, but they're horrible in other respects. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, I'm reminded of the line from I forget where it came from. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, and I appreciate your pointing out the stark realities we're up against. And yes, it's nice to have these ideas, and it's very important we do something, and it's also very important we realize exactly just how powerful the juggernaut we're up against is. And I come back to three questions I often come back to in the face of this kind of thing is, given these enormous challenges we're facing, the question that comes up for all of us is, what can I do? But below that is another question is, there's so many challenges. I can't work on all of them. So what calls me? What issue, what suffering speaks to me, and what area or focus really calls to me and is where I want to turn my attention. And then the third one is, what's the most strategic thing I can do? Given my situation, my connections, etc., how can I trim tab most effectively? How can I leverage myself? To quote Archimedes, give me a lever long enough and a place to stand, and I'll move the earth. Well, okay, how can I, in my little way, move the earth in some small way and make a contribution? And these are koans. It's not like it's oh, that's the answer. It's like these are questions to really sit with over time and feel into and allow ourselves to first to appreciate the enormity and the complexity and urgency of the issue and the challenge of effective responses, and still to look, what can I do?
Yeah, well, look, you can't, by doing something, whether working on the nuclear matter, there are groups that are fighting the nuclear buildup, or in climate, there are even many more groups fighting for stabilizing the climate, reducing and eliminating carbon emissions, and then not so much the whole bio business, the bio threat. Any of these things, if uh, if efforts are made and become effective to slow it down, that indicates there's a social, political recognition of danger. And that is very important to me. I think, and you shouldn't think that you don't have impact. If you organize just where you are in the Bay Area, and that grows through the internet, through the connection that people have, that will be taken up in other places, in New York, in Washington, and throughout the world. So because with the internet, so it's doing what you can, trusting that there will be a spread of this idea. We're on a collision course. We're on a trajectory that I don't think, and a lot of other people think, cannot end well. So we have to turn, and everybody can contribute in some minute way to that turn. And it's not just you, but as you gather with others, that then ripples out. The communication is made, and other people are inspired. And you never know who will have the energy. It's amazing how people who, Dennis Hayes started Earth Day, 1970, just out of nowhere. We got an Earth Day. So and Greta just started talking about it, and for a few years made a big impact. So you can't tell depending on where you are. I believe, joining the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, supporting Greenpeace, the Sierra Club. There are things you can do, and in following activities through the internet, it's small. So but that's what being a human being is. But we don't know how that smallness can be amplified by the shared sense that we need to change. We need to make a turn. And I certainly think that's possible. We don't know. And when I asked Bill Perry, what gives you optimism? And I think the answer is worth reflect on. He said, the future is unknowable, unknown. So we don't know. Is it bad or is it good? We don't know. So don't derive a conclusion from something you don't know. So that then emphasizes the present moment and what is it within our grasp to do the best we can.
And Jerry, what would you recommend to a young person growing up into this world? What would you?
I don't know. As a general, I don't know if I have any general recommendations, but what kind of? I mean, that's so broad. What the people? We all have to live our lives. I don't know.
I guess the question is, given this, how do we live our lives? How do we put the next foot?
Well, I would recommend having a father who gets elected governor, because that really helps you become governor yourself.
Yeah.
So it's also nice to have a great grandfather that starts a ranch and gives it to his son, and his son doesn't have any children. So then my father picks it up with his brother, and so there I am. So there's a lot of stuff that we don't control. And so it's hard. I don't think there's a general recommendation. Life is too various. People become carpenters, they become coders, they become college students. If the range is just unlimited. So I think we have to narrow cast a little bit. You have to, if someone came to me and they had a specific question, I would have a thought and I would give them a recommendation. But at a generic level, I don't have anything to say. I can't say anything.
I think we might say that to those of us to whom much has been given, much is required. And I feel I had a I've been given a lot in my life, a lot of opportunities, and therefore I tried to give back. I think you had a very gifted life. You went to the best schools and you had a good father who was a politician. And just from the outside, it seems that you tried to live your life in service, not just to accumulate stuff and power and to sate your ego. So I think, to me, you're a noble example of how, to whom much has been given, let's give back. And I don't know, only history will say how effective it's been, but it certainly seems to me that you've worked hard at trying to do that. So thank you.
I would give you a slightly different service. I haven't thought of myself as living in service. I think of myself as living in inquiry. And even when I joined the Jesuits, my goal was, what a good place to go to understand what is God? Where do you find God? What's that all about? That's an inquiry. That is, I wasn't going to the Jesuits to save the world, and that was part of it, to save souls, as we talked about. But the big driver is the quest for what is, for truth seeking. We say the truth will make you free. Well, the truth is pretty important. Well, maybe it's all that's important. Well, not just the truth, because there's charity, there's love, there's camaraderie, there's helping, there's doing good. But from primarily, my interest has been, as I frame it. Now, I probably don't fully understand certainly what motivates me, but inquiry, learning, just even working. I emphasize, I do have specifics though. Why did I get interested in the environment? Why did I emphasize climate? Well, part of it comes from why I went into the seminary. I wanted something that's important. We're sitting around, what the hell does life mean? I had a sense it was empty and meaningless when I was 18. So what do you do in that case? Well, you join the Jesuits. That's meaning. And then the Jesuits, they tell you you're doing God's will. If you follow the rules, you follow the commands, the orders of your superior, the way of life. That's what God wills for you. It's an interesting concept. I'd never heard of it before. But you have God who becomes man with Jesus Christ. He starts the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church authorized the Jesuits. The Jesuits are still existing 400 years later. I join. And so the order tells you how to live. And then doing that, you're doing God's will. We can't do any better than that. The creator of the universe has a program. So that was a very, comforting. So that was a theory. All right. So now I leave all that. I said, okay, I've taken that only goes so far. So now I'm going to go out into the world. Now we're not in the world of theology anymore. We're in the world of politics. So then the question is, what's important? And when I read, I think it was in the 70s, I remember reading an article about the fragility of the atmosphere above and the thin soil below. I never thought of that. How the vulnerability and that idea resonated because it was about something that was absolute. This is not opinion. This is not a Democrat, Republican, progressive, unprogressive, ice, chocolate, or vanilla. This is we can rely on the fact that the environment is there. It has rules. We can cause more damage or we can cause less damage. So that then becomes almost theological. It's an absolute. It's a very firm foundation, and that's what I liked about. That's why I've drawn to the environment. There's a lot of other things, like in education, like in crime and punishment. There's a lot of opinions there, but you know that parts per million CO2 building up is not good. And at 1.5% growth from the industrial period of 150 years ago, that's not good. And 2% growth, or 2 degrees rather, that's bad. And that's where we're headed. So that then becomes something you don't have to doubt. There's no agnosticism here. We may not know all the ins and outs of the carbon emissions, what they're going to do, but we know it's bad, and we know stopping it is an absolute good. And that's why. But that flows from inquiry. What's important? And I do think respecting our environment is important. Of course, the same thing as human beings. I worked hard to allow people who've been in prison a long time to earn their release and they've been locked in there with no parole, no hope. And I was able to enable 6,000 people to get out. So those are all things I did. But I somehow, the idea of giving back or doing service, I find just doing what I'm doing, that's what I'm doing. Why I'm doing it, I obviously, I think this is what needs to be done. What I can do, this is what I want to do, this is what I should do. So I do it. But putting more labels or theories on it, that then is another exercise, which I'll leave to you guys.
Thanks.
Well,
Thanks for that. Yeah. That's a
yeah.
big question.
And clearly, inquiry has been a central dynamic for you. Really, you have questioned every sacred cow I can think of, and come out of that questioning with really concrete responses that you've been called to. Uh, but you started your inquiry, you say, with the Jesuits, but of course, obviously, it was a personal inquiry before then. But you also did deep inquiry and reflection, etc., in Zen, and in other ways too, philosophical. How those? Can you speak to those?
Well, let me just speak to the Jesuits. When I was in the Jesuits, we had probably in our class, we started with 30, went down 10, 12 in the space of 2 years. I was there almost 4 years. In that, we had common beliefs. We believed in heaven and hell and God and the devil. We believed in eternal damnation. We believed if you committed a mortal sin and you didn't go to confession and get forgiven and you die, you're going to heaven, or going to hell. And hell will be eternal torment forever, not just for 10 years or 5 years like the Holocaust. No, forever. Okay. Everybody, I think, believed that, including me. Then one fine morning, hey, wait a minute. I don't think that can't be. How can there be an all-loving God that has created eternal damnation for, for eating meat on Friday or for uh, killing somebody? I mean, it's one thing to kill somebody and get a prison sentence. It's another thing to go to hell, if such could be. So, but everybody believed it. No doubt, no question. That's the world. We had no communication with the outside world, no visitors except your parents for 2 hours once a month. We had no television, no radio, no newspapers, no secular books. It was one world where everybody believed that. Okay. So now, hey, I don't believe a lot of that. Okay. What today are beliefs that everybody shares but are wrong? So that sense of being in the midst of unquestioning belief and nice people, good people, smart people, highly educated people, they believe it. So that has led me to be very skeptical. Skeptical myself. I don't believe most of what people say, or I want to say, well, prove it, or let's go a little deeper into that. What are we talking about here? So that inquiry has been a very powerful, um, powerful driving force. Even as governor, when people say, "Well, this is the law," I say, "Well, could you show it to me?" No, well, no way. They can't find the law. Well, it's a regulation. Well, show me the regulation. Well, they can't find the regulation. Well, we've just been doing it. Well, why have we been doing it? So you can go down that path and really illuminate the context, the situation. So without being a total skeptic leading to cynicism, but rather inquiry leading to illumination, leading to a grasping of deeper truths, that's the path that I'm drawn to.
The love of truth, the pursuit of truth.
Yes, but I mean, it sounds a little grandiose, but our curiosity might be a little more humble way to put it. I'm very curious. How do things work? Where the hell are we going? Now, Zen, as I understand Zen practice, it's not study. It's sit on your cushion, follow your breathing, follow move. Breathe in, breathe out. That's all. That's it. Just shut up and focus. And whatever it is, it is. So I don't know what you can derive from Zen, although the art, the tea ceremony, the so many things that flower arranging, all the different ways that have been the product of Zen are quite remarkable. So just being present in that form leads to many things. But of course, if that's your idea, that's called a gaining idea, and that's bad. So that's the issue. Emptiness doesn't, I don't know how you use emptiness. It doesn't add to the gross domestic product. It doesn't increase your wealth. Just, accepting that in our world, it's very hard because we're very oriented toward success, toward making something happen. Well, awareness, Kensho, Satori, that's not a commodity that you can exploit.
No, but hopefully it does provide an opening, a space, an awareness in which we can live more fully, be more alive, and hopefully respond more effectively to the very issues you've been raising.
Well, I'd rather know and see than not know and not see. See, understanding. That's the
Okay.
most of the time we're wandering around in half-baked ideas and prejudices, and of course we have to have a lot of half-baked ideas because you can't figure everything out all the time. So,
well, you don't get baked unless you start off half baked, right? So maybe that's just a way through.
So that's being human. So understanding, very important understanding of the world, of ourselves, of our neighbors, of what's needed, that's quite a lot just to dedicate yourself to that.
It's a lot, and I want to put it in a psychological frame, Jerry, because you've described in your own life a developmental progression, which our culture is still wrestling with, and that is that we start off at a uh, conventional uh, conventional level, in terms of development of faith, Fowler's stages of faith, conventional mythic, where we just believe and take for granted the stories and narratives and myths we've been given. But then hopefully we mature to what's called individuative reflective, where we begin to reflect and question for ourselves and become and individuate as separate people in which our ideas and lives are based on inquiry and personal reflection rather than just a blind acceptance of what we've been given. And it feels like our culture is still wrestling with that transition.
Well, I think every culture is, and there's just a lot to learn. As I say, there's 40,000 books. I get the New York Review of Books and the Times Literary Supplement. They come out. One comes out twice a month. One comes out 4 times a month. So, and there's always plenty of books, plenty of ideas, plenty of essays on all these different questions. So
Yeah.
there it is. Of course, when you're younger, you think there's more to learn, and luckily, as you get older, your brain tires, so you begin to uh, seek less because you have less energy, and maybe that's a comfort as you slowly fade into the sunset.
Well, looking back over, since you've mentioned looking back and aging, Jerry, if as you look back, any what do you wish you'd known earlier?
I saw that question. You wrote it down in the email to me. I don't know what to say. If I'd known, is this a what do they call that? Counterfactual. If I'd
Yeah.
known X, hey, if I'd known what I know now, I might have got elected president. Uh, what might or might not have been, even if it would not have been good. So, uh, if I'd known how good my wife was, I would have married her a lot sooner.
I can say the same about my
So that's one thing I would say.
yeah. Um,
Oh, yeah, what I would know, I would have asked my grandmother more. I'm very sorry about a lot of things, but she lived before the car, born in 1878. Uh, and she was around in 1950, 1960, 1970. So, boy, what transition. And she was a seeker. She used to take my father when he was a little boy uh, to different churches in San Francisco, different lectures to hear. She was, even though she had limited education, she was very interested in the spiritual, not dogmatic, but more of an what we're talking about, an inquiry into the depths of our reality. So yeah, I wish I'd had more conversations about what that was to live with no electricity, no car, no running water. What was that about? And then you come, she leaves the ranch when she's 18, comes to San Francisco in 1896, and she lived here ever since till she died in 1974. So that's quite. There's probably a lot of wisdom there, a lot of that I never really tapped into. So yeah, if I known that, I would have dealt with that. So even your these are more personal things. So I can think of political things. My eye for the political is clear, having gone through it for 50 years. Uh, but personally, we have the same thing. We can have things that we learn, but life is going from ignorance and darkness into hopefully greater illumination.
yeah,
Oh.
and mystery always remains.
Yes.
Always mystery. Yeah. Jerry, this has been so rich and so just beautiful and so multifaceted.
You know,
You
I want to add one more thing just to throw
good.
something on the table that you're not going to have. One of the meditations and a famous spiritual exercise of St. Ignatius, it has divided into 4 weeks. First week, you meditate on hell and damnation. Then ultimately, the fourth week, you meditate on the beauty of God and the world and everything that's good. But you start out on the negative path. And one of the meditations is to meditate on one sinner, a sinner who committed a mortal sin and died, is now burning in hell. And you who've committed a mortal sin, you are not in hell. And God has saved you. And how wonderful, how merciful God has been. And I made that meditation. I did. It wasn't until recently I thought, wait a minute, that's not equal protection. God's putting somebody in hell for one sin, and he's not putting me in hell. We're doing the same damn thing. Instead of gratitude at the mercy of God, it's horror at the inequality. So here's an interesting point. I didn't think of that at the time when I'm doing that meditation, 1956. And nobody brought that point up. Hey, wait a minute. Would God really do that? And is that really a good thing that we're saved and somebody else isn't? That thought never came to mind. Well, if that thought didn't come to mind, what thoughts today are not coming to mind that down the road we can look back and say, boy, I never quite understood that the way I do now. So that's a point that we can know there's more to be known, more to be found.
Yeah, learning is endless, and mystery always remains. Yeah, beautiful. Jerry, this has been so rich. Anything else you want to add?
No, I think I've said more than I should have.
I know that feeling. I know that feeling well.
Yeah. No, I think you've said what you should, and it's just been a real gift just to have this dialogue with you, Jerry. Personally, it's always a gift to engage with you and to wrestle with some of these questions, and it's really a gift for our listeners. And hopefully, your words will reach out through the listeners to other people, and hopefully contribute to some of the healing we so desperately need, and some of the wiser responses we desperately need. So,
And finish the book.
What?
Finish the book.
Exactly. And remember the great comfort, the future is unknown. So don't conclude that all is dark or that all is bright. It's unknown. So as long as we're breathing and functioning, we have a lot to do.
Beautiful. Well,
Thank you.
Wonderful place to end. Thanks so much, Jerry.
Thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah.